Welcome to Flying Upstream, the podcast where we uncover the choices, practices, and wisdom that defy mainstream conventions. I'm Kristyn.
And I'm Luisa, and together we're here to illuminate the alternative paths that have shaped human experiences through the ages. In each episode, we'll examine ways to move beyond societal norms. We're passionate about how timeless wisdom and unique lifestyle choices can foster healthier, sustainable, and enriching lives.
Join us as we navigate, challenge, and celebrate the beauty and insight of walking the road less traveled. If you've ever felt like you're flying north for the winter while everyone else is flying south, you've found your flock.
I am your host, Luisa Anderson, and together with my amazing co-host, Kristyn, we explore the unconventional paths that people take to create fulfilling lives. We dive into the stories of resilience, growth, and transformation, uncovering the lessons learned along the way. If you are ready to be inspired and empowered to follow your own unique path, you are in the right place.
That's right, Luisa. And today we have a very amazing and inspiring guest, Julia Pearce. Julia, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thanks so much for having me. My name is Julia. I live in the western part of the United States over here in Utah. Right now, our mountains are covered in snow, which is lovely. We love that here. I know it's bonkers, but I have lived an amazing, adventurous life. Part of it has been on my own. And then I went to my second act and found this amazing guy. Didn't expect that. And then along came our son, and that's what I love speaking about. But the other part of me is I love running those mountains. I love sitting in a really comfy chair covered in a blanket, reading books. I have stacks of them all over my house. I love eating chocolate. I happen to have a year's supply of my favorite chocolate. And I love doing this, speaking about my favorite topics, which include my son, which we're going to get into. That's me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And snow. I mean, it seems like the time of the year for that. I am in Texas and it's 46 degrees out and I'm wearing a parka. So I totally, more power to you. I'm glad you get to enjoy those things. But I want to jump right into what you said that we are going to get into today. And let's talk about your son. How has your son changed the trajectory of your life or shaped what you do today?
Yeah, so part of what I get to do is speak about him. He came along in my third act, and then he survived an illness when he was 2 years old. Part of that came after he was this typical little dude, just was born with a natural zest for the world, faced the wind, watched kites, watched fireworks, and then he survived an illness after being that young squire, we call him that, or the prince or the emperor, whatever rules the world. He then survived that illness. It came along with that survival. He lived a life with disability and ongoing illness, and it brought to us this a next adventure. We call it that because he survived with all those things and yet kept his adventurous world around him. He also continued to love music, and he kept the rhythm and the strum and the drum with him as illnesses came to him, but never stopped him. And that was the joy of just trying to keep up. And basically, I became the chauffeur for ongoing adventure on our mountains, in our streams, and doing all of this stuff. So that was part of what changed me forever, was going from this really calm mom doing the stuff to then, oh, I'd better catch up to him, because he was going for life with full force and living really spectacularly, and I had better catch up to him. And that's what we did. The world of disability does not wait for you. You'd better go into the streams of life. And that's what we did with him. He had multiple disabilities from that illness. It was never known what happened from that illness, but it did change him forever, including needing to communicate differently, walk differently, use his hands and all of his world differently. And he was there for it. He just took it in stride, and I was the one going, oh, lands, I'm in this tornado now and I'd better be there. That's what changed me from the time he was almost 2 for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I can definitely see that would be tremendous for your entire family, I'm sure. I'm curious if you, one, if you're comfortable sharing some specifics, because I know some of our listeners out there, I'm sure would love to be able to connect and relate to you. And then I'm also curious to know how that path that you were now on, how were you helping your child find their voice and advocate for themselves?
Oh, what wonderful question. So, some of his specifics when he left the hospital, the doctors, like I said, didn't know what had happened. So, they need to give you something when a child leaves the hospital. And his diagnosis at the time of discharge was called post infectious encephalopathy, which means there was an infection, they think, and it happened all around his brain. They never found any evidence to what that was, so that was their best guess. Doctors are fabulous at practicing medicine, and he had an extraordinary team around him. And they basically said, hey, let's go for it. When he left the hospital, they said, we're going to connect you with occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language pathology. We're going to get some what they called SMOs, which were basically little things that went in the shoes to help him walk again. He had lost all of his skills when he was in this illness at the hospital. And then there he also had ongoing seizures. So this was a big deal. The other thing that happened is he couldn't speak any longer. He couldn't communicate with expressive language. So we started learning sign language and then what's called augmentative and alternative communication. So he started using picture symbols, and then later, a few years later, we started using what's now called speech generating devices. So he used a lot of things to communicate, up to 7 devices across his lifetime. So there's a lot of things that he used, not from the time he was 2, but over the next few years as life came to us. And again, I was the one swirling around going, oh, I got to land all of this together. And he was having a grand time because he was up for the adventure and saying, Mom, you got to do this. Where are you? Let's get going. That was a little bit more of his whirlwind. And he was a joyful, adventurous guy. Again, we live around the mountains. So he also did therapy in a clinic and therapy on a mountain, which is called skiing in Utah. You go skiing. That's what we did as well.
That's truly amazing. I love that you continue to incorporate therapy in the sense of being outdoors and the using skiing as a part of therapy, because I think sometimes we forget that the really simple things in life can be so therapeutic to our existence. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we keep coming back to how you're at the center of all this. You're having to put all of these new pieces together. And as a mother, Kristyn and I are both mothers. I understand how overwhelming that is, and that is without a disability. As a mother of a child with a disability, how was that experience for you on a personal level? Besides, I'm sure, the absolute whirlwind, how did it impact you on a personal level?
In the beginning, when he first became ill, so those seizures started suddenly and traumatically for him. They were trying to stop, they being the doctors, were trying to stop those seizures from being constant to occasionally to in clusters, and seizures happening in clusters are still a really big deal. So it was ongoing and fast. So it was like this ongoing occurrence. And then it became, oh, I'd better get going. So there were moments of overwhelm. There were moments of, you got to be kidding me. There was moments of hilarity because he was still learning how to walk again. And he found it almost hilarious because he would be walking straight and then to the this way and then straight. He was learning how to do things. And most of the time, he took it in stride. And so I needed to also take it in stride and find my rhythm again, which I did by doing yoga and running and finding hilarious moments. He was still finding it hilarious. And so, not taking things so seriously all the time, and yet paying exact attention and going forward in the moments that we could. It was also listening to our music still. We still hummed and drummed and played music really loud in our house and danced. I was a horrible dancer and was told with the eye roll of a soon to be teenager as the years passed that, like, oh, you're horrible, mom, which teenagers should be telling moms, you're horrible dancers. And then we continue to be horrible dancers. And so it was all of the feelings and keep going. There's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. So we did.
You know, what comes up for me when I hear you say that is just immense bravery and courage, knowing that the situation you're in, what you're going through in life is so difficult, and still, like you said, enjoying the small moments, still laughing, still being able to rise up and get out of that fear and sadness that you may have in that moment. It's just amazing. I'm also wondering how community has helped you in this journey. So you talked a lot about with just your immediate family being able to go skiing, music, and dancing. How about the larger community for you, and how important was that?
Incredibly so, I was able to be connected with a group of other moms who had children who were disabled from the time our son was very young. So, probably when he was 4 years old, I was connected to this group of moms. Their children were older and they had been there and done that. And yet we were still trying to trudge through systems, educational, other systems of human services. And we sat together and they said, "You're with us now." And I said, "Oh, I am forever with you. In fact, I know them still. And it's been 30 plus years. We connect and have soup, and then we go get bread. And of course, there's always a brownie involved because we're just going to chat until everything is cold, including the hot chocolate. But that's what our community is. We also have an amazing extended family who adored and adore our son. I say both tenses. And so it's this powerful group of, there's no way to do this alone. The medical community around our son, he pulled the best to him and didn't withstand anyone who couldn't be there to pull out the best within themselves either. It wasn't uncommon for him to walk away from people if they couldn't be there for him. And I was like, well, there you go. You got to do this with him or he will walk away from you. And he did. And I didn't come back. Like, we didn't retest the waters. So that sense of community, disability community, family community, friend community for him and us is powerful.
It's really amazing. I love to hear that your son, it sounds like, took on the bravery that you were showing, right? That your family was showing. Instead of shying away or hiding from the problem, you stood up to it and you're like, this is what it is, and we are going to continue to make the best out of this life that we were given, despite any challenges that came across. So I really applaud that. I'd love to hear, in your opinion, because you have obviously been your son's advocate, what are some of the pressing issues in disability rights world that you think should be addressed today?
The things that I still think could be addressed and need to be addressed are what he showed. Now, again, this was 32 years ago when his space started. And what he came through was being able to be self-determined, which is what we all want. We all want to be in our own space and make our own choices. And as I think of the word, he did it in two ways. Either with a look, using a communication system, or by leaving a space, and by making the choice throughout his lifetime, even when he was a tiny tot. So before he became sick, before his illnesses, he was determined to be himself. The other space for the disability community that he showed the power goes with it, and that's for self advocacy. Now, we say self advocacy, and that means that he also had choice throughout his lifetime, even when he was in the hospital the first time. People stood around his crib and didn't know if he was going to survive the illness. And yet, the next day, he climbed out of the crib and was like, well, here I am. Who are we going to follow? And it was him forevermore, which self advocacy, even when we don't know what is going to happen next, we follow the leader, which the leader is the person. And when we think about it, when I think about it, I'm going to follow that person. We follow down from that moment that he climbed out of the crib and we got the IV pole and said, what are we doing? We have no idea. The doctors came down and they said, so I guess we're going to start again, because they had a plan and then they had a new plan. So those are the two things: self-determination and self-advocacy. And then we go. Oh, and by the way, get out of the way. Like, we just got out of the way. That's it.
So amidst all of this that was going on for you, how did you make time for yourself in all this? Right? Because I have two children, Luisa does as well, and it's difficult enough having a child without any disabilities to put yourself first on occasion. And how were you able to do that in your experience?
I think when I became connected to other people, to other moms, to other dads, to other folk in the disability community, I had two quotes that I found that stuck to me, and then a third thing that came to my soul. And the first one is from Mark Twain, of all people. I don't know how this happened, but it said, go back to doing what you did when you thought you knew what you were doing. I know, I'll say it again. Go back to doing what you did when you thought you knew what you were doing. And when I was young, I loved to run. And I mentioned that I ran. I run mountains, I run trails. I also now plod because I am older. I don't do the same things. But I went back to doing what I did, and I ran. And it was sometimes a half a block. And it was then to the next pole. And then I started doing longer races. But I made the time when he was in preschool for 3 hours. And then I made 20 minutes of time. And then I started doing yoga for 20 minutes. And I took a breath when I was waiting for the bus. He went to special education preschool, and then he received ongoing services. And I made 10 minutes of time. And I found that when I stood still, I could do the next quote, which is from Arthur Ashe, and it's start where you are. Sometimes that's it. That's the only part of the quote I could do.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, your story is so inspiring. I appreciate your vulnerability with us today because I think this is going to help people. And that brings me to my next question that I have for you is how, amongst everything that you went through with your son and with your family, I know how hard it can be to find that time to step away, especially when you first begin to do it. How did you find the inspiration to do what you do today, to be an advocate? Besides, not just for your son, because by advocating for your son, you're advocating for the whole disability community. What inspired you to be able to be like, yes, I did this amazing thing. You raised your son to be who he is, to self advocate. How do you then say, on top of that, I'm going to go and help people too?
Interestingly, there's not much choice. Once you get going into this realm, there's this other space of, oh, now you're hooked. Oh, by the way, there is this been there, done that. Now go and do something about it. And our son is a powerful force. We say, oh, the force is strong in this one. He never tolerated keeping it for himself. He was this powerful force and still is. And I say this because he did pass away. You have heard me use past tense. So he did pass away from his disabilities and his illnesses. He is a strong force. We say this like he's a Jedi. The force is strong in this one. So part of it is when you have been in a realm of, oh, crikey, this was helpful to us. How dare you hold on to it? How dare you go and not give this to your friends and the next group of people? Because my friends, who I have known for more than 30 years, are saying, hey, how are you? So, what do we do with our silos? We call them silos in the disability world. The silos don't like that. I know. Sorry, silos. Our systems of support. There's many ways people with disabilities get support, and the way that we do it is by helping people who are here. We're here. Our son was a force of nature. The whirlwind exists, and that's what we do, even when it boggles our mind that we're still in this realm. That's what it is. We have a question, my husband and I have a question that says, so what are we going to do? So, what are we going to do? Do you take it and bottle it up, cap the genie of what we have lived with? No, no, you don't get to do that. If you've had a 3 year old and you have lived through the 3 year old of joyfulness, and oh my gosh, you want to go down the slide, it's 46 degrees outside in Texas, you're going to go down the slide. You're going to do it. And you're like, oh, I got to tell another mom how you're going to go down the slide. Put your parka on. I love that. That's what we do.
That's so inspiring to hear your courage. And I love how you phrase it like it's not a choice. This was part of your life and this is your message now. And as we start to wind down here, Julia, got one last question for you. Curious to know what advice you would give to other parents who have children with disabilities that are struggling to make it work, to understand, and to have the courage that you had.
There was something our son taught and teaches because he was the most resilient soul on the planet. His illnesses were ongoing. Pneumonia was his nemesis. It was the ongoing, along with disabilities that continued. He had a lifetime of change. He had all these things, and he would pop up like a daisy. He would come up through the snow, and it would be like, I'm going to change how I ski, and I'm going to canoe, and I'm going to go horseback riding, and we're going to change how that happens, eh? And so we did. And his resilience created joy. And that is not how we think about resilience. We think about it giving us bruises and battle wounds and causing us tumult. And yet he taught that resilience and joy can be together. I can smile as I hold a handkerchief in my hand. And he's the one who gave that. So my remembrance for others is we can do both. We can be in the space of resilience and hard and also grinning. I have so many smile lines and new wrinkles because I can do both. It is the joy of being in the space of waiting for a shoe to drop on us, knowing it's on a centipede with army boots and still being in joy. Does it come easily? No. Do we create it? Oh, yes. Yes, we do. And that would be my thing. It's also what people can find how to do themselves. It's why I say I'm in my third act. I am still looking up. I am still waiting for the next slide to come. I do seek them out. That's why I brought them up. I love slides. They're fun. So did our son. That is what I am doing now. It's where people can find it if they choose it, and I'm here for it. There's so many other ways. What a great question. What a great way to look at our view.
Thank you so much. That is so beautiful. I actually saved your quote here, so don't be shocked if you find it online. Resilience and joy can be together, because I think that as a society, we have this concept that has very much been drilled into us that they can't coexist. And I love that your son taught that. I love that you're going out here and teaching other people that. I'm grateful that I got to learn that from you today. And I want to thank you so, so much for joining us today on the Flying Upstream podcast. We really hope for our listeners that today's conversation sparked something inside of you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
That's right. For more episodes, resources, and to connect with our community, make sure to visit us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
All right, free spirits, that's all the time we have for today on Flying Upstream.
We hope this episode sparked your curiosity and ignited a desire to explore the extraordinary paths less traveled.
Even when the current feels strong, a whole world of possibilities awaits.
We'll see you next time on the other side of mainstream.
So keep questioning, keep challenging, and most importantly, keep flying upstream.